I'm super excited. Well, Paul mentioned the opportunity to come and talk today from a user experience or opportunity experience. That's pretty awesome. I'm excited to share a little bit about not just DPR and what we've done and the longevity of some of the green building things that we've been touching for quite some time, but share some of the things that we need in the marketplace and that we've really done a poor job of trying to create those on our own. We've realized that we're a construction company, not a software company, if you will. And I think it takes a while of making some of those mistakes before you realize what your real opportunities are. So with that, I was going to share with you a little bit about where things started for us. This building here on your left and my right is a company called Aspect Communications. Anybody remember that company back in the day? Telco, if you will. This company was trying terribly in 1999 and 2000 to attract employees in Silicon Valley. At the same time that the Googles and the other companies were really getting all their talent. The CEO was a guy named Jim Carragher. He was on the board of Herman Miller. At the time, so was a gentleman by the name of Bill McDonough, who was a green building architect, one of the industry leading green building architects. And Bill would tell you so. He actually is really quite prolific in the space. I had just relocated from Richmond, Virginia, doing a big job for White Oak Semiconductor, building some 64 DRAM fab plant out there. And all the green features that were showing up in this project, I was trying to value engineer out of the project because I didn't know any better. We were in the .com boom, operable windows, light shelves, natural ventilation, underfloor air distribution. All those things were, cut it, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. But we ended up building things like a clear story that would allow for future photovoltaics, so sort of future proofing or discussing how we might put PV on the roof and the sort. This project next door here is another example of an early green building project. This is Carnegie Global Ecology Center at Stanford. And this project has some features that are, obviously this catabolic cooling chamber that is similar to what we'd use here in Phoenix, where prevailing wind comes across, it catches the wind, pulls it down through an atomization chamber where it's just spraying misted water, and it's taking 80-degree temperature through a cooling chamber, and it's collecting that water as well as moving the air through the building space. Very low-tech solution to providing a cooler building. Then at night, there's a sprinkler system attached to the standing seam roof of this building. At night, when dew point got to 55, we would spray water on the roof. It would basically take that cool water into a thermal storage tank. During the day, as the building's mass came up in temperature, we would pipe the cool water through the radiant piping system in the slab. So another low-tech solution to a lab building that uses 70% less energy than a normal lab. It's only 15,000 square feet, but we're proving a concept. You can take water at night, cool it naturally, for lack of better words, thermal storage during the day, and use it appropriately to keep the building cool during the day. So as well as natural ventilation and operable windows. This is one of those big aircraft doors that sort of come up and they open just like an aircraft hangar would. And that first time we've ever seen anybody put glass on that. I tried to value engineer that out too, because there's no way that's going to stay on there, but it did. And it became a very open area for the students to sit, we got the cool air coming through. But what we really were doing back at this point in time in our industry is, this project's 1999, this project's 2001. We were really just doing this. We were tracking waste. That was all we were really able to do, was keep track of what we were doing from a waste diversion perspective. It was really only a metric that the construction companies were able to keep track of. What's our diversion percentage? Other generals, myself included, would make a press release that we're going to divert 75% of all of our waste, and then have to go through fits and spells of trying to convince people to recycle. That was all the things that we were doing. But it was an early stage involvement of what our opportunities really were. I put something up here because I wanted to kind of show you what and how things have evolved within the green building industry. I think our firm was an early adopter related to our engagement with the USGBC all the way back to 1999. My first term on the USGBC's board was 2000, and I spent 10 years on the board, off and on. But what I realized as I was looking over our history of the company is that there were some significant things that happened to us. Anybody have a sense of what this blue line might reflect? Any guess at all? That's our revenue year over year. That's our sales. So .com boom, .com bomb, if you will. Using that as a mindset, what about this green line? Any guess? That's our percentage of green work as it relates to our overall sales. Right? So I'm on the board of the USGBC in '99. We're flatlining, man. We're not even doing anything. Carnegie, that job I just showed you, was constructed in 2001. We had about 5% of our volume that year, of course, low year, big volume, relative to green building projects. So still in its infancy, we were cheerleaders in a movement that needed a lot of work. I went to our CEO, Doug Woods, the D in DPR construction, and asked him to make this green building thing an edict. And that's one way to skin a cat, just make us do it. Let's build a better building and not build crappy buildings anymore. He told me emphatically that we don't do things that way. Make it a groundswell. Change needs to happen from the ground up, not the top down. That's his mindset. So this orange line reflects all the work we did for folks to become LEED accredited professionals. So folks understood LEED, understood green building, could talk a similar language. Fortunately, I think what happened in 2004, as the market started coming back, so did the opportunity in green work, but I think as a direct result of we had staff and engagement that people understood how to sell a green building project. Not just the first cost, and I was talking about this briefly with Bob at lunch, not just the first cost, but what's the benefit of what we were trying to sell? Because the questions we were getting is what's going to cost me to build a LEED silver building? That answer is always, well, it depends. What points are you pursuing? What's your HVAC plan? Are you doing anything innovative? But a lot of folks had a sort of it had to pay back in 3 years was the developer model back in the early 2000s. I think today, most developers are holding property for a long time. So energy performance and payback is a really important thing. So I'll share a little bit more about that as well. To the carbon discussion we were having earlier, just to give you some sense, we were just going about our way, building our happy buildings, and I realized that we weren't paying attention to carbon the way we should be. Because in part we were hearing that maybe this carbon tax thing would happen, maybe it wouldn't, but the EPA had something called climate leaders. And in 2006, we joined voluntarily and voluntarily reported our carbon for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. As you know, we're only obligated for Scope 1 and Scope 2, but Scope 3 was what we influenced. So where products got purchased, how our employees commuted to projects, where we put our employees on projects. In some cases, we'd have a guy in Tracy driving to Napa because he was the most talented winery builder. But that's the wrong commute for him, not for his balance of life, his healthy lifestyle, things of that sort. So had some really cool stuff we were learning as a result of that. And we decided in 2007 we would reduce our carbon footprint by 25% by 2015. So an arbitrary noodle against the wall, but kept ourselves accountable for how to do that. But we were sitting in the room with the PepsiCos and the UPSs and the Roches and those sort of folks that were having similar guesses as to how to reduce their footprint. And they were doing it by way of, if we use Roche as an example, by fleet vehicle reduction, building efficiency and management, things like that. We were doing it via changing our fleet vehicles, reducing the amount of air travel that we went through, things of those sorts. I mentioned the idea of creating things to solve problems. We were getting that phone call all the time that wanted to know, again, the price of building a green building. And with Paul's help early on with a tool called EcoLogic, and then beyond that, we had a spreadsheet that basically had every tab of the LEED rating system that had the calculator associated with trying to figure out that solution. And that would get broke about the time I sent it out and someone missed the paste link, and I spent more time in file management than actually building green building projects. So we created this tool we called Green Book that went through the information of where the project resided, what its overall summary was, what its price point was for the different levels of certification, and then showed graphically what our first cost spend would be and when that would pay back for the various levels of certification. This tool, although not as complex as we probably wanted it to be from a pre-construction perspective, brought the CFO in the room for the discussion about what it would save them over time. When they can see that a platinum strategy of $400K pays us back in 7.5 years, we're a 20-year owner of the building, we've got 12.5 years of profit because of that. So the CapEx discussion was one that was changed because the OpEx got to move into CapEx for the delta. So it became a thing that we were able to sell as a pre-construction service that was evaluative, measurable, had some payback. This is another smaller version of how that payback curve looked. This is our San Diego office, which still is one of the more popular places for people to go hold meetings and hold up for a while. It's also not far from Miramar and La Jolla. But this was a 1970 building that was at the end of its useful life. We basically demoed the entire thing. We added PV to the roof, clear stories, a lot of natural light. And on top of each one of these sails is a solar tube. So bringing natural light in. Jerry mentioned 2- and 3-story buildings are the right mix for some of these. There's thousands of these buildings all up and down the 8, the 105, the 10. So an opportunity for us, people coming now to these spaces, we'd like one, just like this. And this is the LEED Platinum building, net zero energy. And it's a great space. We save about 60 grand a year in energy, and we've put more energy back on the grid than we've used. So that's kind of cool. Moving beyond our work, this company in Mountain View we do some work with. This is the 1.2 million square feet of green campus that's being designed currently that really pays attention to a lot of different things that we weren't able to pay attention to in the early stages of Aspect. That Aspect project, we had to go to the city of San Jose and actually convince them that underfloor air distribution was doable without putting fire protection under the raised access floor. They'd never seen that before. They were going to mandate it. And that was going to throw the cost even further out of whack relative to first cost. The folks in Mountain View, we've got green roofs, we've got now natural ventilation. This is the largest black water system that's ever been done for a campus is being designed currently. So it will treat and manage all of our waste on site for 1 million square feet of office. Price point wasn't much for that. It was the idea of selling it to the founders and getting their buy-in into it, right? We have another client in Cupertino that's building a big spaceship. And there is about 6 megawatts of solar that's on top of this building. That in the back over here is a 7,000 parking structure that also has a PV array on the entire top of that. That combined with fuel cells and a really efficient building, this building, as Steve indicated, the city of Cupertino will be very close to being off the grid. So technology that wouldn't have happened and wasn't available 6, 8, 10 years ago is now being designed into a building that iconic would be an understatement. There's going to be over 60,000 meals a day generated from this cafe, and the energy going into provision of organic food, how they handle food, best-in-class experiences around that. What's also happening is this is, as you can imagine, a highly repetitive building block of opportunity, right? It's the first time we've ever been able to construct a building that had this much repetition. We're always given the opportunity to build a building for one time and one time only. It's never the same building twice. So things like this now, we can usually think about the way they, Toyota way, best practices, how those things work. Virtual design and construction tools are helping this product be designed in London and Cupertino, in New York. We're going to have probably 6,000 employees out there at the peak between the entire campus, doing lots of really interesting things around virtual design and construction, software tools, and the sort. I mentioned waste earlier on, the first thing that we could really effectively track in 2000. Looking back to you guys, the implementers of ideas and software tools, so the company called Green Halo here that has basically been trying to figure out a way to skin a cat that has involved, the entire industry, right? How do we track waste in a simplistic way that is accessible to everyone? It's not the way it used to be, which is I've got 15 different haulers that are giving me a spreadsheet that's in a different format, and I'm trying to keep track of that on a monthly basis to share that with the client or to comply with the local building permit code, that was the first thing they regulated too, was waste diversion and how we did that. So this tool now provides a way for us to not just show our diversion, shows how we recycle, but comply with what we have to do for the cities, as well as ultimately upload things to the LEED documentation as well. So customized tracking by building interface. Here's back in Cupertino. We've got the main project. Then we've got a massive amount of demolition that's happened. We've got the main building, which is what DPR Skanska is building. fitness center, theater, parking structure, research buildings, site work landscape. Those are all the components of this massive project. And I can drill into each and every one of them to understand exactly how which project did as far as its diversion stats and percentage around that. Not a tool that we could have created and done very efficiently in our previous world, but with software folks, we're able to do that. Also, the idea of drilling into some of these tracking devices and seeing exactly who hauled what where, because that's, again, part of demonstrating performances. You got to show what you did. Once that's all said and done, we then can just push that information to the lead documentation portfolio and upload our documents when we're done. It's a nice thing. So what's next? We've been talking a little bit about 2020 and 2030, but in 2010, we were really focused on LEED certification, how to get there. Cal Green, our local building code, Title 24, was being implemented to really raise the bar for how any building has to meet a different energy performance scenario. We were focusing, because we're so heavily invested in pre-construction services, on what the return on investment was. And the term total cost of ownership that Paul mentioned earlier is now incorporating the life of that piece of equipment or that system into the overall maintenance program. So we're actually giving the owner a true depiction of what the cost for that system would be. An example would be an air-cooled chiller versus a water-cooled chiller system in a data center. You know, they have different maintenance schedules, different operability, and different energy profiles. But before it was first cost. Now we're looking at total cost of ownership, so we can see over the life of the building what's it going to cost to replace that chiller, remove it perhaps from the bowels of the building, things like that. So moving into 2020, we're here clearly. Healthy buildings and EPDs, we've heard a couple different dialogues about that. We found we're really partnering with industry leaders, industry companies as well, about how to implement our technology and investigate what are the best opportunities for our involvement. We've got 2 net zero projects right now, San Diego office, Phoenix office here. San Francisco just basically launched 2 weeks from today. We'll be moving into our first San Francisco net zero office building. And that's what clients are talking about. That's the next level of discussion. I know we talked about what Jerry's seeing with Green Globes, what we're seeing with LEED, but folks are really wanting to get their buildings off the grid where palatable. And now that we've got a couple big corporate America, Fortune 100 companies that are putting their money where their mouth is on it, I think we're going to start to see a pathway to see more of that being done. One of the things I thought was interesting too around technology is the implementation of the BIM model for more than just a design feature up front, where we're using it for a predictive energy model or the sort. Now we're actually putting smart objects within the building, within the BIM model. We're focused on the facilities management aspect of what the model can do. So the model is being turned over with the O&Ms, and they can click in to see what's in a wall. They can walk around with their iPad and see exactly what's up in the systems. So the model is becoming a pivotal tool in the way we evaluate and understand what's going on. Some other technology I didn't mention when we were talking about Apple and Cupertino is that the use of drone technology. Okay, so there's a predetermined flight path that is basically keeping track of our construction progress via motion and still photography. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Launching, there they go. Take pictures and keep track of it. That's going to be a great tool for us to have moving forward. So fully integrating all these things currently in 2020, but our goal is to get to regenerative. I know that the residential market in San Francisco has to get there, but we're going to really spend some time working through some of that. Can't stress enough this notion of total cost of ownership, so we'll spend a lot of time in the next few years ourselves developing tools to go around that. But if you were to Google what is TCO, you'll see there are so many people that have no idea either how it affects them. So TCO is an opportunity. I mentioned San Francisco. This is the renderings of our soon-to-be new space moving in a couple weeks. We spent almost our entire TI allowance on upgrading the roof of this building to allow us to put 130 kW of PV on the roof. And the rest of the finishes inside are pretty sparse because we wanted this building to be one of the first buildings in San Francisco to be off the grid. And not just demonstrates what we try to do from a build perspective, but gives our clients an opportunity to see what a living lab looks like. So if it's the fans that are in the space, or if it's the the electrochromic glass that's being put in the skylights to actually, just like our sunglasses when we go outside or some of the glasses that change, we can phase change glass to drop down the solar heat gain coefficient. We're putting living walls in the space and large trees, so it's going to be not just a showplace, but an economical piece of how you can build an office building in San Francisco for not a tremendous premium and be off the grid as well, pay back in 4.5 years. So pretty substantial. So I think that's the end of my talk. So I've got a couple extra minutes for questions. Anything?
Any questions? Okay.
Sweet. Nothing?
Who's the client for that front view?
Search engine company.
Yeah, speaking of that client, actually, I was wondering if you could talk about
Google it.
the,
I hear a voice, but I'll see where you're. Oh, there you are.
yes,
Sorry.
I was wondering if you could talk about you know, the experience of doing a regional-sized collection, waste management, and PV, or, you know, net zero sort of system versus trying to do that on every building. It strikes me that the individual buildings are too small a scale to really be realizing the efficiencies you need.
The notion of microgrids and things of the sort. Yeah, and that, actually, believe it or not, the Mountain View client opportunity had a tremendous amount of investment of time evaluating how to do that, because that campus keeps growing down 101 and into NASA Ames now. And the reality is that there's still a lot of regulatory issues that prohibit you from creating a microgrid large enough to justify the expense of that. But as we looked, even in San Francisco as an example, I told you we spent almost our entire TI allowance on this project upgrading a structure to allow for PVs to be on the roof, when the 3 buildings that are adjacent to us have almost nothing on the roof. They're concrete already because they were meant to be able to be expanded higher, but we can't use their roof because a regulatory issue doesn't allow us to put our PV on someone else's property and generate to ourselves. So I think there's, the reason why I don't have a great answer is because we found on both the Bayview campus as well as in San Francisco that we were kind of hamstrung by some of the regulations that wouldn't let us get there.
Hello, I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by off the grid? Is it really off the grid, or do you just mean it's neutral in terms of electrical energy usage? Because it must be, for a single building, it's exactly the same question, it must be not so efficient to have all the storage or whatever.
Right. Well, I think the notion of off the grid to me is that we're producing the amount of energy that we need annually.
Okay.
Off the grid to me is we're creating our own water. We're handling our own waste. So I apologize if I misled you with that. I think as it relates to the Mountain View project, that client has invested significantly in renewables that are not on campus. They're renewables that are in the other parts of the world. So that really doesn't parlay into that decision, but the idea of treating your waste on a corporate scale to tertiary standards, to me, was a great way to demonstrate what you want to try to do, and that's going to pave the way to other clients doing the same thing potentially. Right?
I have a second question. I'm a controls engineer by profession originally. How do you deal when you work with buildings with operations really long down the road? I mean, there's an enormous potential still in operating any kind of energy usage system much better. We work with these in other areas like district heating in Europe, and technology is still far behind what could be done.
Yeah.
How do you account for things really with that long horizon in the future? Buildings should live 50 years or what?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you account for change and improvement in how you operate the systems?
Yeah, perfect question. And we just have gone through this in partnership with Honeywell that we're working with on our 945 Front Street project in San Francisco, where we know there's an inordinate amount of opportunity now between EMCS and SCADA and others for us to keep track of what our systems are doing, to the point where we're doing a big mission critical job in Utah where we're collecting millions of points every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds. And that's really it's probably for the 3 hours we need it because we want to go back to a fault and figure out what happened. But as it relates to the direct energy performance of a building, to me it's the idea that now we're going to be able to constantly monitor what's really taking place in our space and do it in such a way that can be visually demonstrated to not just the occupants of the space, but even back to a certification body perhaps, or in some way that we can see that, hey, these fans are operating at whatever efficiency. If we were to take them up or down a notch, it would improve efficiency. Our San Diego office is an example. You know, I mentioned in an interview a few days ago that our company was founded over a bottle of Silver Oak wine, if you guys drink wine or not, but back 20 some odd years ago. And as we opened the San Diego office, we had a lucid design dashboard that was meant to show performance day over day, month over month. And we could see that we were something like 3 watts a square foot at night. Where these are not just ghost loads, these are like, you know, what the heck's going on in this space? We shouldn't be burning that much energy at night. And we found that when they were relocating the wine, they decided to put it in the server closet, just crank the air in there. So we were burning all this energy at night, keeping the wine cool. So we got a proper wine refrigerator, and now we brought that back down. But had we not had, that's a simple way of saying, had we not been able to monitor that performance, we wouldn't have known for maybe months that it was not calibrated properly. So.
Oh, we got a question here first.
Oh, sorry.
Are you looking into single-family residence houses or anything?
Sadly, we don't do single-family residence. We're a commercial general that does education, healthcare, life science, mission-critical work. But they're absolutely, I've got a good friend at Pulte, and they have a net zero and sort of dark green version of their company right now. So I check with those guys.
Thank you.
New and exotic building materials like carbon fiber. Number 2, printing buildings rather than building.
Wouldn't that be great?
And number 3, earthquakes.
Yeah, earthquakes. That's both the bane of our existence, and it's a happy place for us in San Francisco because we're building a lot of new replacement hospitals as a result of the earthquake mandate for buildings that really weren't safe to be not just healing environments, but what if they come down? You know, carbon fiber. We actually I can maybe go back and show you this if you can. You can't see it in this image, but behind that sign, there's a communicating stair that goes upstairs. We've got some friends in the Bay Area that are sailors, and we do a lot of carbon. Know a lot of carbon fiber guys, and we actually investigated: can we build this staircase out of carbon? Because A, it would have stopped a whole lot of structural improvements below grade we had to do, but 2, it would have been a really cool way to demonstrate some neat stuff. Price point wise, it was too early adopter as far as that goes, but we investigated, and I think again, sometimes it's just a matter of moving the chain a little bit. I can see in the next 3 years we're going to be building carbon fiber stuff. I can almost guarantee it. So, and the second question, Jack, I'm sorry, was you had carbon fiber
Buildings instead of buildings.
printing buildings. You know, we're an industry partner with Autodesk, and you know they just acquired last year, I think maybe a year before that, Instructables. You heard about that company? So at Pier 9 in Wharf now, they have their I call it their special projects group, and they are printing things that I would have never imagined possible to print. So I wouldn't say that far away. We'll see some components for certain. So, good. What else? Thank you guys very much. Happy to be here.